How about now?
Yay.
Yay. Good evening again. It's still October 1st. I'll be sitting in for Jeff tonight, and the first order of business is to review the meeting minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at said minutes?
I'm sorry, I was unable to read them because we were only provided a link and I couldn't get it to work. I apologize. Was I the only one? You guys could get that to work, the link? Okay, never mind. I'll let you speak for us.
So, Jim,
Yeah, Carl.
what did you think of the meeting
I
minutes?
thought they were great, Carl.
Okay, would you like to move that we
I
adopt
move
them?
that we adopt the minutes for the September 17th, was it?
I think that's what they were.
Meeting?
Yes. Second?
I second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. So we have the meeting minutes, and I think we move it on to Lucy Sloman to talk about continuing Swedish Development Agreement.
Yes, but first,
But first,
this is Karin, our recording secretary's last meeting. She got a full-time job. And she doesn't need us anymore. She's going to miss us, but she doesn't need us. So we just wanted to bid her farewell.
well, thank you.
So, and the second thing is we're going to take our appendices a little out of order, and we're going to start with lighting because you guys had a lot of questions about lighting. I spoke for a while with our lighting consultant, Denise Fong, who is sitting in the back row, but because we're trying to wrap everything up, you know, all of your comments up tonight, we asked Denise to come because I am not a lighting consultant. I just play one on TV. And that way, if there's follow-up pieces, we can hopefully do it and then let her go.
Lucy, before you jump
Yes?
in, so if I can say one thing, just to set everybody's expectations in the right spot and so that Connie doesn't feel like she has to leave her house to come here. I don't think we're expecting that you guys are going to make a recommendation tonight. I think the expectation is last time we blew through appendices A through F. Good job, UVDC. And tonight we're going to take the second half of the development agreement. We will then give you what we heard as the issues that you guys raised and try to address them in text and give that to you guys as, depending on how detailed it is, either a new red line version, but hopefully more of a standalone memo, because I think we can potentially do it in a couple pages. And then come back at a later time, and I forget what the next meeting is, that we would talk about this development agreement. But basically then talk about the edits, see if there's any other things that you guys want to talk about, and assuming all the issues have been put to bed, then look for a motion and a recommendation from you guys at that point. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. Nothing, no actions tonight. We'll probably take an action sometime at a later point. The other thing that we're doing is we're allowing the environmental review to take its course. So the SEPA decision is being worked on and wrapped up right now. And there's a comment period that's associated with that that's 21 days. That happens through the month of October. And that way we can come back and have one conversation with you guys after the SEPA piece is done, because it's not exactly done yet. So just wanted to make sure that you guys had a good understanding of where we thought we were going tonight.
And to tag on to that, let me just talk schedule for a minute. The next meeting is October 15th. We won't be doing Swedish that week because the SEPA piece will still be in process. So we'll start with blocks, Issaquah Highlands, blocks 25 through 27, which is DevCo, across the street from Swedish. So you don't really leave the West 45 area, but you're dealing with a different development agreement and a different group. And then on, I believe it's November 5th, it's that first Tuesday in November, we're probably going to need to make that a long meeting, maybe add an extra hour to it or something, because we'll be doing the second half of the block 25 through 27 SDP and wrapping up Swedish. So that's kind of where we are.
Any questions on that from anyone? Concerns? Okay. Can you get the November 5th date out as soon as possible so we block all that extra time to be together?
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
And do you think we can do that in both of those in one meeting? Or
Well, you know, as I said that, I'm just sitting here thinking about a couple of other alternatives, and we'll talk through those. We'll keep you posted on schedule. I think that we're very clearly meeting the next two Tuesday meetings, not the next Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays. And the question is just, are we going to do extra long meeting? Are we going to alternate Swedish and DevCo? I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking through that. Any other questions on schedule? Great. So, lighting. As Keith was doing last time, I can kind of walk through the changes that are in here. I think one of the pieces that I wanted to get back to you about, because there was a lot of focus on full cutoff fixtures. And what I need to let you know is that the U in bug is the uplighting, and if the U is 0, that's a full cutoff fixture. And full cutoff fixtures, that term is no longer, that's not the way the lighting industry refers to it. And so by using bug, we are up to date with the current techniques and thinking of the lighting industry. So, yes. So most of the first pages, it's formatting. And then the first edits I see are on page 5. And so you can see in 2.3.2 that we're saying that for circulation facilities, it has a U value of 0, which is consistent with being a full cutoff fixture. And then the next edits are on page 8. And we added a standard that says that after dusk and before dawn, that lighting shall either be designed to be significantly lower, providing the minimum necessary to maintain security, than for areas anticipated for nighttime use, or fixtures shall be chosen that can be dimmed to reach a similar level of lighting. So this was a recommendation on the part of Denise's in response to some of your comments, that they're now seeing lighting codes that have certain kinds of non-essential lighting going to half power at night, say, midnight to 5 or whatever. But we would need to obviously work with Swedish on that, because there's some areas that may be in use 24 hours a day and other areas that aren't.
So Lucy, you said sort of midnight, late. This says just after dusk?
Well, I think we would, with each permit, then apply this standard and figure out what those hours are.
Okay.
Then we removed a guideline on page 11 because those streets aren't in this development agreement. Those were lakeside street types. Then on page 14, stop me if I get going too fast. On page 14, guideline 3.6.6, which was written for like fuel sales and car dealerships and such, was rewritten to address some of the issues that we found with like the ambulance bay at the emergency room, in which, or other circumstances where you may need brighter lighting and you're using the canopy to contain the amount of light that comes off outside the canopy area. Yes, ma'am.
To the earlier edit on 3.5.2.
Oh, thank you. I missed that, didn't I?
Yeah, and that seems like, is that because it's covered in the vehicular or thing of the bug 0 needs to be, U needs to be 0?
Well, I actually realized that that was, and this may have been an oversight on our part, I haven't gone through the edits. The intent was to add a standard, and I'm not seeing it. So we will double check this. There was the circulation facilities were a standard that there could be no uplighting. Parking lot roofs were a guideline. And so the intent was to move that to also being a standard. And I don't know whether we missed that or not, whatever, but I will make sure that gets taken care of.
I'm sorry, you're saying that parking lots are not circulation? Is that what
No.
you just said? So it doesn't fall under the standards?
No.
2.3.2?
Right,
Yeah, so we need to cover it somewhere else.
exactly.
Okay. Excellent, thank you.
The intent was not to eliminate that. Thank you for catching that. And then we added another guideline about external lighting should consider visual impacts from off-site, which, sure.
That, I think I remember the discussion being the effect of internal lighting as the images imply. And so the use of saying that it's external lighting, it's lighting that's getting to the exterior, but had you thought about whether you use the word internal lighting? Because are you trying to say that lights from inside the building?
Well, here's what I remember of our conversation, which is that the internal lighting is much more difficult to control because various parts could be used more, we don't know exactly what use might be located on what part of the campus. And therefore to say, for instance, that they should, we could ask them to consider, but there may not be anything that they can do for those uses. And I think that was external lights, you can, for instance, make them lower, more shielded. That doesn't really work for internal. So I think that was where my memory of our conversation, that we recognized that there was some differences on internal lights than external lights. But let me know if you remember it differently. Okay.
I know we spent a lot of time talking about walkway or a covered connect.
The sky bridges?
Sky bridge, that's
Yeah.
the word I'm looking for. Are there rules specific to the lighting of that, or does that count as an inside structure? It's more visible from more angles.
So, we did talk about those, and that was after, our conversation was after this draft was issued.
Okay,
And I did make a note about skybridge lighting and glow at night.
okay.
I don't know whether Denise has anything she wants to add. I guess my thought is they are kind of like the conversation we were just having about, if they are in use, they're going to be lit, and they're, maybe they can be dimmed and, then go up to full power when someone walks through them. But I'm not sure that that there's an alternative,
Okay.
given that we're asking that they be, 70% glass so that they have a certain openness and airiness. But
So there isn't any specific
guidelines
guidelines
about,
in terms of that type of structure?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It
Don't
just
be-
seems like they could be treated as kind of both indoor and outdoor. There is some lighting that could be used to light roadways or whatever, because they're passing over something. And then inside, obviously, it's different. It's got to be lit in such a way that people are safe. But it seems like they should be covered on the outside.
Right. I was speaking of internal lighting. So
Okay.
that's a good point, clarification. Most of these guidelines are around internal external lighting. And so I think in terms of external lighting, they would all apply to say if there were lights under the bridge that lit the roadway or other things that were going on. Let us talk about the idea of potentially having, if there are ones that could, dim at night and then go back up to full power if someone enters them, like the new sort of intelligent lighting that you see in rooms. Anything else?
I have a question. Are you sort of through with lighting, or can we ask a question about,
No, you can ask.
okay,
You can ask a question.
down under 3.8, the neon sign, the caption next to the dental shoppy, neon sign lighting may be appropriate if done in a tasteful manner, which, given the discussions we've been having about sign codes and whatnot, does our sign code even allow neon lighting? I didn't think it did.
I'll double check. So, I think that there has been, I know that there's some neon lighting that's internal to where it's behind a panel. That's just the choice of lighting. There is also neon lighting that is not actually neon. It's LED and other kinds of technologies, but it has the appearance of neon.
I'm just reading.
Okay. So do you have let me turn this around. Do you have a concern about neon lighting, or are you worried about an inconsistency between?
I'm worried about the inconsistency.
Okay.
That we're saying in the development agreement and saying it may be appropriate, where I know we're having discussions elsewhere in the city that may not even be allowed.
Okay.
I found a portion in the lighting standards under 2.3.10 where it says lighting in exposed parking areas, which might be the standard that you would go looking for. And I'm interested in the choice of language that says installed to avoid direct light spill, glare, reflection, light, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't say anything about the U being 0 and that kind of thing. Should it say it there?
I think that might have just been a miscommunication on our internally as we move things around. So we'll get that fixed. Thank you.
So Lucy, I do have one question about uplighting, and I could be wrong here. Did you earlier say that you're going to discourage uplighting completely for landscape and other things?
No, I did not say that.
Okay.
So there are some areas like circulation and parking where we're saying no uplighting.
Okay.
And then there are some other areas in which a bit of uplighting is actually encouraged.
Okay.
And or at least allowed. And part of that, in speaking with Denise, and I'm now going to be teetering on the edge of my knowledge, so then it'll be her turn to reply, is that in pedestrian areas, it tends to feel safer to have a little bit of lighting of the buildings and the space in which you are, and therefore it makes for a more comfortable and pleasant space.
Okay. I agree. I just
Okay.
make sure.
Anything else?
So I think Jeff would want us to say we all feel much brighter. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next one.
Okay.
What's that?
You.
can stay there for parking?
Oh, okay. I can.
Like all yours, and then landscaping.
Okay, you didn't tell me you were going to make them mine. That's fine, I can do that. Okay. So now we're going to go back to where we stopped last time, which is parking. And even though I opened this, I forgot to use it, so I'm going to skim through up on screen. So you can see on page 2, in the purpose and intent, we included shuttle bus loading zones there. That was, I think, one of your comments. And then in existing uses, this was a request these are actually your edits, so I'm going to let you do this one.
All right, thanks for coming. Okay, so so basically, this was just a clarification in 1.2. And so required parking. So we've really got in section 3 here, you know, parking used to just be vehicles and bikes, and we've made kind of a concerted effort to expand our net to include motorcycle. So that's where this is where Jeff would appreciate, I think, some of the edits. That's where the edits in 3 come. So we talked about this, I think, a little bit under land use. So I'm on 3C now for accessory retail uses. And basically, you know, if your belief is that the accessory retail uses are truly accessory to the hospital and medical office and other offices that are being used, then what we're saying here is that there's no parking, additional parking spaces that would be provided for the up to 60,000 square feet of accessory retail use. So in other words, if there's a bookstore in either the hospital or on the, you know, the ground floor of a medical office building, it's not likely that you're going to drive from the valley floor up to Issaquah Highlands, stop in at Swedish to go buy a book. You might, if you've got a relative that's getting a surgery done and you've got some time to kill, go to the bookstore, the florist, or whatever the case is. So the idea is that the accessory uses would not have their own parking calculation. And so I think this is, philosophically, this is a big piece. This is probably one of the biggest pieces in this chapter. And so I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what we're saying so that later somebody doesn't say, well, wait, that's not what we talked about. So you're going to say wait now, or you say wait later?
Yeah, this is the one, the main thing that I noted in my questions about parking. And so just as a reminder for myself, I'm looking at the land use chapter, and this includes coffee shops or restaurants, florist, newsstand, bookstore, specialty retail, small specialty retail, and pharmacy. And indeed, they could be accessory and all the things that you just said. That sounds like a great idea. But I was also imagining that if they were all 60,000 or less, and you had a whole bunch of them, then you would come up to a problem. And I think I wondered if it needed just a little more boundaries so that it didn't expand beyond what you had anticipated as being an accessory use. For instance, the coffee shops, just as an anecdotal example, God, I can't tell you how many people were going down to Starbucks at Swedish just to go there. And Swedish wanted them to. I mean, that was great. So...
So the thinking, so again, and I think we can draw the line where we want to draw the line. So it's good to have a dialogue. So I think part of so to give you guys a sense of 60,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet would be like a larger grocery store. It's bigger than the Safeway. If you put it all together, it's a lot of square footage. But what's happening is most of this square footage is being broken up into little retailers, I think consistent to what you have in the hospital right now. Now, I know there are people that drive to the hospital to either go to Starbucks or to go to the cafe or to go to one of the specialty shops to buy something. But the idea is that that's probably one or two patrons an hour or a day. It's a fairly small margin. And I think the idea here is that if you look at 60,000 square feet in relationship to 1 million square feet of office space and the number of parking spaces that are required for that 1 million square feet, this is really de minimis. And I think the idea is that there'd always be some parking. So if we're wrong, and people do choose to use the 60,000 square feet as a drivable destination retail, there's probably enough parking in and around the area that it won't be a problem. So that's a big assumption, and we're kind of grossly looking at this. And so I think the question for you guys is, are you comfortable with that? And if you are, then we're good. And if not, then where would you like to draw the line, or what would you like to propose as an alternate?
So let me just add one piece, that in the Raleigh and Lakeside Development Agreements, we have provisions that allow uses under, I think it's 10,000 square feet, are not required to provide additional parking. And that's based on other, like Seattle does this, that's from their parking code. And so we aren't talking necessarily about something that is contrary, because these uses have to be accessory. This is in their purchase and sale agreement. So you're unlikely to end up with very many people that are going up there, and it's the same concept that we've used in other development agreements.
I have just a quick question. Any idea currently in Swedish what amount of square feet they have for accessory?
Their guess is 20.
20,000? Okay.
No, they were allowed 20, but yeah.
I think it's 12-ish.
Okay.
That's if you include the, sorry, you're not Mike, so I got to say that. So that's if you include the cafeteria. I'm really not parroting you. Actually, I am, but there's a reason.
I think another question I would have is, probably they didn't utilize the full amount that was allotted. Like here you have up to 60,000 square feet, which doesn't mean that they're going to actually use that amount.
They're not sure. I think they don't know that they're going to use all this amount, but this is kind of what they negotiated in terms of their purchase agreement.
Thank you.
So, to what you just said a moment ago, Lucy, about the uses, and that these would be accessory uses, and I just want to bring into this conversation what may make this more challenging, or is at least related to it, is the shared uses clause that allows you to designate or to not have parking spaces because they're part of the different hours. We'll get to that later, I know. But like the shared parking, here we're talking about infrastructure building based on which is a permanent thing, based on a temporary use of a space. And so say in 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, the use turns into something that's not accessory. Does this clause restrict the leasing of that space to another party that's not accessory because you didn't build the parking back in the beginning? How does this all work out?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I think the question is, so let's say that they have 30,000 square feet of retail, and we say, okay, well, we won't count that in terms of your parking calculation. And then 10 years from now, they want to change that to office space or medical office. At that time, at that change of use, if we're not clear on this, they would have to provide additional parking spaces or show us that they meet the total calculation with the conversion.
So I don't think that what your scenario, if they change the use, we would have to go back and look at the parking situation. So if they built in the mid-range between minimum and maximum, they might not need to build any more parking because they fell in the range. Or if they built at the bottom of the range and they therefore needed to build some additional parking, they could do a traffic study and a parking study to show they don't need to do it. But there would be some action necessary because we're just saying it's the accessory uses, not just any uses.
And just to clarify then, is there a trigger, the accessory use is specialty coffee shop, and say it changes from a specialty coffee shop to a Trader Vic's or something, a destination dining for all the area, and it's not really changing from retail to commercial, which may trigger a visit. Do all changes of tenants trigger an approval from the city?
Well, I think we would say all of the non-office uses, and I'm kind of saying that broadly, all the non-sort of medical office building, non-hospital uses have to be accessory. So I think we would say if you want to build Anthony's home port on the roof because there's an amazing view and the doctors are ready for it, we would have to say that isn't going to be an accessory use because a lot of that's going to, like you said, is going to be a destination restaurant, and that's inconsistent with the agreement.
Is a change 20 years from now from the
So
coffee
if
shop
if
that was
it's-
in?
If it's truly a change of use, so.
Oh, not a real big change of use, just going from coffee shop to restaurant. Do they really have to talk to you guys to do that?
No.
No.
So then that's where I would get worried that this fuzziness, it may be a destination restaurant in its next use, and they never had to talk to you in the first place.
When he says they don't have to talk to us, I would say I think you two are saying different things.
Right.
They are likely going to need tenant improvements, which would require a permit, which would give us a chance to look at it. As long as it was an accessory use, we would not be talking to them about parking.
Right.
But that doesn't mean there aren't permits that they're going to have to get that would give us an opportunity to say that's not an accessory use.
Well, that is a follow-up question I wanted to ask about, and I don't know if this has been edited yet, but on 1.2 applicability,
On 1 point, sorry, Michael, 1.2?
1.2 delta.
Yeah.
So it talks about applicable changes to the project here. Substantial remodels or additions has a 25% trigger.
So that's, so what that's trying to recognize is that that the project includes the existing hospital and other things out there. And I think what this is trying to recognize is if they wanted to go in and say remodel a wing on the hospital, and that constituted more than 25% of the building area, then they would now have to bring all of the property up to these current standards, which includes, just as for example, motorcycle parking.
Okay.
Which wasn't part of the original hospital development agreement.
I guess that's what my understanding of that was. So my question is, if they do a 10% addition, a 10% addition, and a 10% addition over 30 years, will there be a review, or is that fine?
That's a great question. It's a death by 1,000 nibbles.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I think what you're asking for us to do is to think through some scenarios and make sure that we've got the right language here to capture the intent. And, I'm looking at the word expand the gross floor area, and there's some other versions of
Right.
that would need, so it wouldn't be there's some place where it's if you change 50%.
I think, so we have that's a nonconformity piece in C, so we might need to go back and gel these two pieces together. I think it's a great point, Michael. I don't think we'd thought about that, because I don't think we'd read this in a while, so.
Well, I know we talk about these long agreements so that people can develop incrementally.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think we need to relook at that one and see if we're okay with it the way it is. My guess is we might want to tweak it a little bit.
In the existing definitions that we have, I didn't see a definition for accessory retail. Is there?
There is in the red line version.
Okay. I didn't-
Accessory uses. It's accessory uses.
Okay.
If you don't
I'll
see it
look.
there, if I'm lying to you, let me know. I'm doing it on purpose. So is everybody ready to move off 3C, 3.1C? The accessory thing for now, at least? I'm going to keep going then. So 3.3, all the kind of bleeding through this section basically takes out the calculations for retail. So all the numbers per square feet is all being struck through because we've just agreed that it was accessory. Now, we did have to add a parking for temporary lodging, so because we added that as a land use. So right now we've got 1.5 spaces per sleeping room.
So there's a definition for accessory use.
And the assisted care rehab nursing, 1 stall per 3 beds. I assume we got those from either city code or somebody suggested those. So rolling down. So we're down to section 4, which is parking districts, kind of our
Just,
favorite area. You want to go back up?
No, yeah, it's just housekeeping. Under bicycle parking, it's called lodging, and under vehicular, it's called temporary lodging. So just words.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the edits that you see in 4.2 is because obviously that was Rowley Development Agreement language. It says Hyla Crossing and Rowley Center. So that was the first clue. So we struck that and cleaned it up. We added motorcycle parking, as you guys can see, kind of throughout this. So the next changes are in section, what section is that? 4.3, tracking district parking.
Keith,
Yes,
back on 3.5, on motorcycle parking,
yes,
3.5A3,
yes.
again, since Jeff's not here, he would argue that the not normally have motorcycle riding clientele, such as warehouses, storage facilities, automobile services, et cetera. He'd say, why would you find those exempt? Warehouse workers not riding motorcycles? Doesn't seem to make sense.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff.
You're channeling him tonight.
Oh, okay. So parking districts, so are we good kind of rolling up through, so a little bit of clarification in B on page 9. It says total number of existing previously provided and proposed bicycle parking must meet or exceed the total to-date number of spaces as required by section 3.5 above. So again, just trying to recognize that there's stuff out there now and that it's all being kind of viewed as a project, except when we talk about sustainability and we're clear that we're at a point moving forward. It's a conversation for later.
Sorry, but just for clarification, when you're saying to-date number, you're saying what is current at that current time?
Yes.
The district then is the entire, the
Property.
old Swedish and the new Swedish.
So
That's
at
a
no time can they
big-
be
big-
deficient with any of their phases as they phase out the build out of their total square footage. So the next thing you'll see that's kind of significant, sorry for having to go back up, 4.5, and I think it's E,
So 4.5C,
C,
before we get to E.
yes.
So this means almost by definition, since 1,300 feet's almost a quarter of a mile, if they're within a quarter mile of a bus stop, they can reduce their parking by 20%? Is that what that says?
That's what that says.
So that means by default that they could probably go in with 20% under the design point.
Since Lucy and I glared at each other, we'll talk about that one and get back to you guys.
Yeah, that's a good catch. I've been at this facility and not like parking was impossible to find, but it's can be a challenge. So that is not necessarily a benefit, I don't think.
I'm going backwards too. Sorry, Keith.
Okay.
4.2 B.
B.
As in boy.
I don't have
Oh,
a B.
I'm sorry.
3? 3B?
Well, where are my parking stall sizes in use?
What page?
Yeah, what page?
A second, trying to make it say at 13.
Oh, you jumped ahead.
Oh, I'm
You jumped
ahead.
We're
Never mind.
not that far yet. We're just on page 9.
By backwards, you mean forwards.
One of the backwards is.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm almost there, Nina. On page 11, you're going to see a lot of strike-throughs under shared parking contract. This is really for when we have different landowners that are sharing parking. We make sure that there's actually a contract to do that because we're basing approvals on the fact that there's that agreement in place. And because this development agreement is solely related to Swedish, this seemed like that this was not necessary. So we struck it because we're dealing with one landowner. So hopefully that makes sense. You all look at me
Couldn't there
skeptically.
possibly be shared use when you're talking about condos going in, right on the block, that they'll most likely have parking after 5 p.m., whereas the commercial use might have parking during the day?
So that's a possibility. I mean, right now, Swedish has
Those are
not.
two separate sections. I'm just going to jump in here.
Oh.
Those are
E is off-site shared parking, and oh yeah, no, you're right. I thought that was a separate section for on-site shared. So this is off-site shared, so you'd need a contract.
So right now, there's not an allowance, I think,
Out of project.
out of project.
Well, when we wrote it for Raleigh, that was the intent. So what we need to do is go back and look at this.
Okay.
Yeah, what about zip cars? Wouldn't that constitute an agreement between two?
That's a separate provision in here. This is,
This is
like,
for-
if Devco and Swedish wanted to share parking spaces in a garage to meet one or the other's needs, because they're on two separate properties with two separate owners, you would need a contract that legally bound them to that, so they couldn't
Okay. Yeah.
use that for other purposes.
So Nina, were you on 4.2B?
No. So that is 5.2B? The
Which one?
numbering is off on page 13?
Because we have 2 4s?
Well, if you go up, you can see that parking tools says 5.
Okay.
Where I wanted to be.
Okay.
I wanted to ask about the letter B, and I wanted to be reminded about how these standards for the standard stalls and the compact stalls compare to others. And I'm remembering, somebody help me if I'm remembering this wrong, comments about an overabundance of compact stalls and not enough space for somebody else. And just thinking about the tenants and the landlords, is this the same as everywhere else, or what is this?
Yeah, the 50 to 60%'s been, that's the same as Issaquah Highlands even. Okay.
So at least there's no minimum on
You do not
compact
have
stalls.
to do any compact
Yeah,
stall.
so that the landlord or tenant, whoever's making this decision, could recognize that most of their people are going to be driving in a big, large east side car, and they wouldn't.
Right. You could choose to do, other than motorcycles, you could choose to do 100% standard stalls if you felt that was your market. Safeway did that, for instance, and that's pretty typical at grocery stores. 100% standard.
I think the conversation that we had back with Rowley maybe was that we felt that there was too high of a percentage of compact stalls in some of the properties that we've witnessed. But the only question I have here is compact stalls up to 50, 60%, when we just say up to 60%? Sorry.
Well, it's as determined by the designated official. So what that means is if someone proposed 60, let's say it was a grocery store, and they decided to propose 60%, and we thought that that was not going to be very functional because it's hard to get groceries in and out of compact stalled car doors, then we would have the ability to say that doesn't seem reasonable.
Oh, no,
You
no,
need to
I-
go
But
down to
Lucy,
50.
I think the comment is, why does it say 50 to 60%? Why doesn't it just say 60%?
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
Right.
yeah, you're getting close.
Well,
I see Lucy.
well, I think what that means is that I could push it down as a designated official. I could push it down to 50%,
Oh.
but I
But-
couldn't push it down to 10%.
Right, but it seems like a middle ground would be to say that it could be up to 60% with the consent of you,
Right.
Lucy.
The 50% protects them. The 60% protects me.
I don't
But
think anybody
could
else
you
reads
only-
that way other than
can tell.
you. So maybe we need to wordsmith that a little bit.
Could you drop that below 50, or is that,
I'm saying I don't think I could do that. I'm saying that I think I could say, because there's a range there, and I think they have too many, I could push them towards the bottom of the range, but I'm not sure I could push them out of the range. But what Keith's saying is, he and none of you are reading it that way, so we clearly need to have,
We'll work on
look on
that.
the words, look at the
Thanks.
words.
I'm just thinking also, if anybody's ever gone to Factoria, their parking, it's almost all compact if you're not around the Safeway, even in the Safeway, I think it's a lot of that. And it's very hard to get in and out of with our east side vehicles. If someone's given the chance to do 60, I think a lot of times, well, they can get all their parking stalls in a smaller space and have use for, use the land for other reasons. It seems like you would want to be able to say, the city would want to be able to come in there and say, this isn't adequate. You need to have some more. And so I can understand how you'd want that range, so why not put it in there that, it's got to have the consent of the city or something along those lines,
Okay.
so that you can change it. I know it's not necessarily protecting Swedish in this because they don't know exactly then what can they get out of this, so.
Well, parking stall size was also an item that was raised at infrastructure, so we should talk about it.
Eric, you
Just
have a
a
question?
quick additional question. So you can have up to 60% compact stalls, and then in addition to that, you have 5% micro stalls. So can you have like up to, would that be like 65% of super tiny stalls?
Are they additive or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you guys, I'm running along, so if you have any issues, I'm not stopping. 6.5, shuttle bus load zones. You guys asked for it? Here we go. If and when the property is served by transit or shuttle service as envisioned in Section 2.2 of this agreement, the master developer may request the city allow the designation of on-street loading spaces sized appropriate for the vehicle to be used. Location of these load zones shall, among other things, take into consideration building entrances, accessible routes, and weather protection. So the idea would be they could reclaim some of the on-street parking for loading zones if there was transit or a shuttle service. Okay, I'm done. You guys have anything else in G? If not, we're going to H. Landscaping. Love landscaping. Did you want to do landscaping, Lucy, or do you also claim that's mine?
I'll do landscape.
I could do landscaping. I don't care. You want to go?
No, I don't care. I can do it from here if you want.
Okay, I'll scroll down, and if I get really confused, I'm going to pause
Okay,
for
so
emphasis.
2.1 was we went through and removed all the references to critical areas. In 3.0, it was making sure that we're tying landscape requirements to Appendix B guidelines. In 5.1A, we're still on page 2, this was tying street trees to the Issaquah Highlands Street Tree Plan, which was a comment you had. And also in E, 5.1E on page 3, it was not requiring street tree grates. There's kind of a movement away from those now. 5.1G, it's saying because we have existing streets with existing trees that they should match from side to side.
I'm just too curious why the movement away from tree grates. Do we like the buckling concrete better instead, or?
No, you would still have a tree well, and you would still have root barrier, and all the sort of below ground stuff is all the same. It's, I think that they've found that it's hard over the life of a tree to keep the grate flush with the sidewalk, and therefore it creates tripping hazards.
Makes sense, thanks.
I think I talked about G, then 7.0, I think that's Keith. That's fine. He's wanting deciduous and conifer trees around the perimeter of parking lots. And then we skip many pages. And I'm just waiting for you guys to stop me if you see something. I'm to 10.3 on page.
10.2.
Oh, 10.2? Oh, yeah. So in 10.2, I recommended striking.
Page 9.
Yeah, sorry. That we had a hangnail from Raleigh of an existing high water table. That isn't an issue for Swedish.
It's a low water table.
10.3, we added some language providing better direction about what fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides could or should be used.
Two stops here. And I'm sorry, to remind me again, does the city have a code for this sort of standards or restrictions? And I'm thinking about
Fertilizers and pesticides?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about science and how things change over time, and we have some of our standards based on what the current standard is. And I just wondered if we had something in the city that we could refer to rather than have the language here.
I don't, so first of all, I don't think we do have, nothing comes to mind in the city code. And second of all, the way the development agreements work, the city code is frozen when the development agreement is adopted. So unless it's a health, safety, or something we specifically call out, it wouldn't roll with time anyway. So,
So, Nina, I think that's a great question. I think what we did here was try and bring forward the protective mechanism that was in Issaquah Highlands
Right.
related to these types of uses to make sure that that didn't get lost. I think what you're asking is, does the city have another standard that might go beyond that? And I don't think we've asked that question. So I think we need to ask that question of the city park department and see if they say yes. But if nothing else, I think our understanding is the integrated pest management approach is kind of like a BMP. So best management practice, sorry.
Yes.
That it moves with time. So as people learn new things and become more proficient with use of things like herbicides and pesticides, that the practice would change along with time.
I think with that, you have the word least toxic, so that's time, that can go over time too, so.
Yeah. So, but I think you're raising a good question, Nina. I think we need to just double check and make sure, because your point's a good one. You know, if we're having an opportunity to make sure that we're kind of doing state of the art, that we actually have language that says we're doing that.
Then down in 10.5, we added language that said, that references local, county, and state invasive and noxious plant lists. Those would obviously roll with time, which is good.
And I was
Just
looking for
spelling.
this one because Chantal had suggested this, I think. And so I was checking to see that it was here. I think this was one of hers. There is a either a misspelled word or a really weird one. And so is proposed, which I think is what you want to say, proposed within the project. It seems like an odd word. Why isn't it just that they will not be
Used.
planted or used or something that's a little more
Definitive.
definitive? Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, good catch on the propode.
I think that's poo-poo.
Propode. Just a question on that. If you say that may be used, then if there's a plant that's already been used that at some point down the line becomes a member of that list, do you have to go back and take that plant out?
No,
I
that's
wonder
part
if
of
that's
that
why you have proposed in
non-conforming
there.
Things. So if you were changing an area up to a certain amount, you would have to remove it. But if you weren't touching an area, you wouldn't have to.
So do we have any plants that would be on the state's list for a different climate zone than here, that we would use here, that would be excluded because of the state?
So you look at this and you say, you know, why do you even have to say this? Well, because we got an applicant who proposed ivy as their landscape material. They were out of state. So I think
No,
that
I'm totally in favor of this. Like, please take 100 plants off our list that we can put in. But I'm just thinking,
no.
based on our climate, some plants are invasive in other parts
Yeah.
of the state that are not invasive here.
Right, I mean, they plant purple loosestrife, for instance, back east, but we would never plant it here. So, I hear what you're saying, Michael, let us, so something might be okay here, but not in eastern Washington, or not, and vice versa. Okay.
So there's a King County list, and I think we could just reference that.
Okay. On the next page, 10.6A5 was referencing that very particular slope diagram, planting plan for Lakeside, the hula skirt, as we called it. So we removed that reference. 10.8A2 on page 10 was taking out references to critical areas because we're using the municipal code, not a specific appendix. And on page 12, 10, 15, same thing. It was a reference to the hula skirt replanting
So
plan.
just for completeness, since you're removing things for slopes and whatnot, do you still need on page 21, the detail E8? Should you remove that as well, or just curious as I was looking at that?
I think I went through that same thinking, Carl, and almost took it out. And then I think as I thought about it, I said, well, what if there was a steep slope that we might as well have this? So, I mean, their land is flat. I can't imagine that they would create some crazy, like, dune, but they could.
That's the
So
thought I
that-
had, and I went through exactly that. I was just
Yeah.
wondering, since you're,
So-
doing that diligence as you go
So
through.
it doesn't say steep slopes, it says on slopes, and for instance, the lowest level of the hospital is actually technically below grade, and they put in a slope. They kind of cut the land away and planted a slope. So, you could have a flat site and still end up with
Okay.
slopes, and therefore I think the planting diagram.
And just when you mentioned completeness.
So I don't really have anything else. It's really if you guys have other questions.
I have a question on 5.1.
Section
street
five,
trees?
section 5.1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Page 3.
Yeah.
and,
Which
del-
letter?
Delta. So D. So the use of a root barrier is encouraged, blah, blah, blah. And my question is, the use of a root barrier is required adjacent to publicly paved surfaces? How do you define adjacent when you're talking about roots? Is there-
Oh, the root barrier, it's usually within a certain number of feet of public surfaces.
Is that defined somewhere else, or is that?
We usually put it on the permit, what the specific distance is, because it depends on the plant.
Okay.
So it could be 4 feet, it could be 8 feet, depends.
So I guess the question, Lucy, because that seems like a very discretionary answer, is, so rather than adjacent, does it want to be proximate as determined by the designated official?
How about within the drip line or reference drip line? I don't know.
Well, roots go beyond the drip line, so let me just look at this for 1 second.
Do you? And then it kind of referenced another question on page 9, 10.4, structural soils.
Okay, sorry, I'm still trying to think about what you asked. So
Well, they're kind of tied together, so.
okay. Okay. So I think we need to add some language to clarify that the designated official will specify that based on the plant, the street tree that's being, the tree that's being specified.
Okay. Because I know in Seattle, there's a lot of root issues that go into public property, and they're not easy to deal with, so.
Right. Okay, now structural soil.
Okay, and so that,
Was
I'm
that,
not
was that
familiar-
10, Michael?
Yeah,
Sorry.
10.4, page 9.
Uh-huh.
It talks about if we don't provide enough growing material for a tree to be healthy, we'll add these silva cells and give 100 to 150 square feet.
I know nothing about this.
Okay,
What's your question? I don't know that I can answer it,
All
but
right.
I know something about this.
it just seemed like we may run into a difficulty there if we have a tree that's near, I don't know if it's even necessary. If we're trying to increase the growing medium, I would assume underneath asphalt by adding these structural cells, yet we have to have root barrier as well. I personally have never encountered one of these, so I just wasn't sure how to deal with it.
Oh, so are you suggesting that if we did this, maybe you shouldn't have to do root barrier?
Well, you'd still need it, wouldn't you?
You probably would. Although, I think these were actually trying to get at different things. This would be, for instance, in a parking lot where, so that could be all on private property, but you're trying to improve the viability and life of the longevity of the tree and by giving it an increased root area in which its roots can grow. So they could be completely two different situations, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on G? H? Sorry. Okay, let's run to I.
Signs.
So, my favorite, signs. Carl's favorite, signs.
Everybody's favorite.
Whoa.
So, you have it open yet? No.
No, sorry.
That's
Well,
okay.
my hard copy looks like it got a little messed up.
We're in
Signs. I.
signs, Appendix I. And the first change I see is 2.48 on page 8.
2.4, oh,
248.
248.
Sorry, I didn't say that
That's
very well.
okay.
There you go. So hospitals were in the definitions because of the corporate ID signs from Raleigh. But because hospitals are the whole point of this, they really shouldn't just be in the sign section, so we removed it from signs because there are no corporate ID signs anyway. So that changed all the numbering. And then the next change I see is 2.1 110 on page 14. Which was the removal of the Urban Village Development Commission, which really shouldn't be, I don't know how that.
Did you guys get your pink slip? Just kidding.
Well, it doesn't really belong in the sign code. It should be in the general definitions section, yeah.
I know it's all about you guys, but
It's not.
we're going to take out the extra references.
And then, under the exempt signs, on page 16 and 17, community facilities, credit signs, garage and yard sale signs, and home occupation signs were removed because they were not uses that were allowed.
I'm not sure Alex and Chuck think they're going to have a garage sale anytime soon.
I think they're thinking really small, but, and same with political signs needs to stay.
Where did you go?
18, S.
You skipped I? Credit signs?
I mentioned, I bundled.
Oh, okay. Oh,
G.
wow, you sure did. Holy cow.
You wanted to get done in
Home
an hour.
occupation.
I'm
Political
bundling.
signs.
I'm not sure that you can say that's not applicable because that, you can't, it's a First Amendment issue.
Well, okay. So we should
Say that
put
louder
back
again.
in, right, Lucy? Wow, I got laid out on that one. All right. Yeah.
So then the next one I see is on page 23.
Lucy, can we go back
Sure.
to page 16, G as in golf? Community facilities, charitable or religious institution bulletin board.
Right.
So if they wanted to have up some community informative bulletin board, that
Well,
would
they,
not allow that?
those aren't allowed uses. A community, they're not going to be any community facilities, charitable organizations, or religious institutions.
So it's to the facility, not the use, I guess.
Right.
Is that what
It's
you're
not saying they couldn't have a bulletin
That's what
board.
I'm
You wouldn't
asking.
have a bulletin board associated with those uses.
They couldn't use one of their unfinished spaces for a congregational church as an interim use. It's not allowed.
saying? Got it.
So
Thank you.
therefore, you don't get a bulletin board.
Yep.
I'm on page 23.
On page 18, under X, where it's talking about residential real estate signs, wouldn't that come out as well?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks. And probably Y and Z. Well, no, I'm sorry. Actually, that's residential. You're right. Commercial. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so what section, Lucy? Page 21?
Well, I'm going too fast, so I'm going to let them catch up with me. I think I'm on
Oh,
page
You're on 4-6.
4-6 on page 23. But take your time getting there if you need to. Yeah, exactly. That's him, yeah. So the automobile fueling station signs, one of the council committees, you know, having the signs in here doesn't make the use allowed, but since the use isn't allowed, they just thought we should go ahead and take it out. Kind of like taking out the corporate ID signs because that's not allowed either.
So what is the accessory retail or restaurant portion that was underneath the automobile fueling station? Is that like the little stores that are with, okay, so that's not separate, okay.
Good question. What? It's what they mean, accessory retail to a gas station.
Quickie Mart.
And the motor fuel protects you from electric charging stations falling within that, if something like that existed?
Well, if you had a fuel station of just electric charging, I suppose that wouldn't be an allowed use. That doesn't mean you couldn't have scattered parking places at which charging stations occur. No, you could even charge for the charging stations. It just you wouldn't have a whole, you wouldn't set it up like a fuel station. I mean, I'm thinking off the cuff here.
You'd have an informational sign that would say it's a charging station, but that's allowed as an informational sign, not as a fueling sign. So it's just a different kind of signage.
Yeah, I know like Tesla is putting in whole little pods where they have like 4 or 5 and it's a specific station. So I don't know if something like that would be useful at some point in the Highlands.
Well,
In that area.
you know what I would suggest is that we look at this. So this is the sign code. So that, I'm not sure that you would want the same kind of signs that you would have at a fuel station, because this isn't the use, you know, for instance. So, because I think that the sustainability section mentions electric vehicle charging, so I don't think the use is an issue. It's a question of what kind of signage could you have for the use. I'm to 28.
Real quick on 26, 4.11 reserved, is something popping in
Okay,
there that we don't know about?
No, you know what that means?
Okay.
We didn't want to renumber the whole section,
Okay.
so we're just holding it. We took something out that we didn't have a replacement for, and we just hold it, and we would put something in there in the future if we needed it.
So
That's-
first they take away your speech, and then they're going to add things in secret. Yeah.
So page 28 then. That is, this was an AMM that was approved for the town center of Issaquah Highlands, and so we've taken the language of what was approved there and put it in here. And basically the intent was we looked at street sign letter sizes, and there are the smaller signs like you see in the residential neighborhoods, those sizes. And then there are the ones that, like on the busier, bigger streets, they're the ones that are, say, on the mast arm of the signals. And those are 12 inches. We looked at the street standards that engineering uses. And so we recognize that on certain busier streets, like 9th and Highlands, that larger letter size was going to be necessary on the vehicular side of the sign so that people could safely read it. So that's the AMM, and we just inserted the language here. So this isn't something new. We just didn't get it incorporated in here in the first draft. And then I'm on page 34, I think. Which was removing garage yard sale signs the first time was as an exempt sign, which means it doesn't need a permit. And this one is for a garage yard sale that does need a permit. And we're saying it's not applicable under either circumstances, so we remove this section. And then there are more First Amendment rights that disappeared.
At least I was consistent. Well, there you go.
Lucy, just out of curiosity, are you going to, the ones that say not applicable, are you just going to take those out? Or why do you have to have them with not applicable?
I think what Keith did,
It's Keith's fault again.
Keith's fault, I blame Keith, is I think he put not applicable in there to help you
Right.
understand, so
And then
that
will
would
be taken out.
that would be taken.
So No, I'd answer that differently. So the direction that the city council has given us is, for the gosh sakes, we want one sign code. And so part of this, because part of this is really not applicable to Swedish, rather than delete it and then have the numbers where you can't tell, it's like just have it there but say not applicable. So the idea is to keep the same bones of the sign code so that we can hopefully show that this is the same sign code. There's just certain parts that won't be applicable to Swedish. That was the reason.
Okay.
So then people won't think that you left it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And the whole political thing, I don't know what was going on there. Because I didn't even put not applicable. I just like struck it all out.
Drinking a beer on a Sunday night, you just said.
Yeah, I have no idea what was going on there. Apparently politics were bothering me that night.
Saw too many ads. Then on page 37, the real estate signs for residential properties got removed. On page 38, the model homes sale, rental, leasing office. Yeah, I can
Why is
understand the
that
model home,
removed?
but I'm not, you wouldn't have sales.
Well-
A leasing office might.
Leasing
They're not
and
well-
model homes because you're providing this housing opportunity and you might, I don't know, you might need that.
I guess the
not
question
leave
would
it?
be for Swedish. I mean, would you ever have a leasing office if you guys did like temporary lodging or something like that? I don't know. Okay, apparently we might be putting that back in.
And then, it's a good thing we're looking at this, huh? Then, under signs in the public right-of-way, political signs are gone again. Real estate signs, N is removed. And then I think we might, I don't know whether we need the off-premises directional arrows, probably not.
It just, yeah.
Okay, and then we, so then we're down to, the next one I see is on page 43. Under section 9.5, it was adding one of the criteria that if it helps facilitate finding an essential public facility, which would be the hospital portion. Although, Keith, we're going to need to change because not all, that wouldn't be all the criteria.
Okay.
So we'll need to fix that language.
So I don't remember where it was, but just a moment ago you mentioned off-premises directional signs, something to that effect. What about
This
assigned
was,
to the
I was speaking in code, sorry. It was real estate off-premises directional arrows.
But this is the allowance for, and maybe it does need some wordsmithing. You know, if Swedish believes there needs to be some additional signage to help the public find the hospital, I think what we're saying is we're definitely wanting to do that as well. And so this is kind of the leader to get us there. But it seems like maybe Lucy's got some other language contemplated. So we'll work on that, apparently. Are you keep going, Lucy?
Yeah, and then I'm down to the very last thing on page 44 and 45, which is another AMM that was approved in the Issaquah Highlands Town Center, and we were just inserting the language in here as well. So they're consistent. And an AMM is administrative minor modification, sorry. I didn't even hear what you said. Okay.
See, right above that, D, lighting, makes a reference to design guidelines, but it doesn't make a reference to the lighting section.
Yep. Yeah, that needs to get changed. Thank you, Nina. So that's it for signs. Unless you have anything else. Going, gone.
All right, let's jump to sustainability. All right, so Lucy, this first one's yours. I'm not going to talk about a three-legged stool.
Well, I think what I was trying to do, there was some language. This is really Chantal's point, that there are many aspects or three legs of a stool that we often talk about, or triple bottom line is another term that you often hear. And she expressed some frustration that this appendix was primarily focused on only one of those aspects. And so this paragraph was trying to provide some context to sustainability, that while we're focused on one particular aspect in this chapter, that if you take what Swedish does and the development agreement as a whole, we are addressing all three of those legs. Chantal, anything you want to add? Yeah, I know.
Brew has a G in it.
Yeah.
You're trying to say that, you're trying to say here in the development agreement that there's stuff outside the development agreement that Swedish gets credit for? I mean, what?
Yes, that was part of it, not credit for, but that there are actions that they take, but there's also that there are other parts of the development. You know, there's the transit section that's up in the main body. You know, there are other pieces that are sprinkled in other sections that are also related to the full breadth of sustainability. They're just not necessarily all in.
It's saying that while the section says sustainability, sustainability is actually a larger topic, and this is only covering one portion.
And I think I agree with what you're saying there, that it's not just this section, it is pervasive in the development agreement, but I don't think it would be necessary or even appropriate to refer to it here, what Swedish does somewhere else, whereas what we're talking about is this land, this development, these buildings, whether Swedish owns them or somebody else.
No, I don't think that's what
So-
she's saying.
I know.
So think about it in terms of, so what we did with Rowley was they ended up choosing the One Planet Living as their model for sustainability. And it kind of runs the gamut from, you should reduce energy use, you should reduce waste of resources, you should grow your food locally, you should embrace the local culture. I mean, it was kind of very holistic. And I think the point is some of that stuff isn't a good fit for Swedish because they're a business and they're not going to be growing their own crops on their property. At least I don't think they are. So I think part of maybe the point is recognizing that, the measures that are in here are really focusing on energy reduction and resource conservation, and not necessarily some of the other aspects of sustainability, which are just going undone. And that's okay. I think at least we're okay with that, and I think we need to hear from you guys if that's okay, because that's where this is at. Michael's been waiting.
I'm fine with this. I mean, I didn't think it was a priority. I know Chantal and I are not on the same page with that, and I'll recognize that. I think the original concern, as stated, was that there should be language in there asking them or holding them accountable for things beyond energy. And I think as you guys have written here, they certainly do that to the community. So I don't think it's anything that they're not already doing. So it doesn't need to be put in here.
Can I just ask, do we, so we mentioned three-legged stool, but it'd be nice to define what the three legs are.
Oh, you want some tangibility to the analogy.
Yeah, I was going to say that if with signs, you mentioned that what the council would like, or that future development would like to see, is something that's kind of a template, then this should probably have that template as well, and we should have a not applicable, not applicable.
The hard thing with sustainability is because we don't have regulations, we have basically negotiations with each of our master developers. And, the approach that the city's Office of Sustainability has taken has been really to talk to the applicants, find out what they're comfortable doing, and then trying to get them to do, maybe to push them a little bit farther than what they were otherwise willing to go. So in other words, it's trying to move the bar. And one of the things that I think the city really believes in is that if we can do things like the green roof that they built on the hospital is great. And you talk to a lot of developers and they'll say, there's no way I would ever build a green roof because it's either not going to last as long or it's going to leak, or there's all these different reasons why they think it's a bad idea. But the more that we get developers to do things that are kind of exemplary, or that we can show other builders and developers that they can do and it's not going to come back and bite them, that's what we kind of look to do with our approaches. And so I guess, Jim, I don't disagree. It'd be great if we could do that. So far we have not found kind of that toolbox where one size fits all. And so it has been, you know, here's what we've done with Swedish, here's what we've done with Lakeside, here's what we did with Rowley's, and a lot of it has to do with what the applicant is kind of comfortable with and willing to maybe go to an area where they haven't gone before.
Can I take from that, I mean, because we have an Office of Sustainability, or to utilize that to its extent and not limit them through a guideline in
So-
some aspects of that?
So let me ask what you just asked. So the city, like it has a Development Services Department and Economic Development Department, it has an Office of Sustainability. So there are employees within the city that work to promote sustainability in all its factors,
Right.
Including transit use and commute trip reduction and, you know, plastic bag bans and things of that sort. So it's kind of the whole broad brush. One piece of that is working with developers to try and figure out how they can incorporate a sustainable approach into their development plans. And so those staff were included in kind of working on this language.
Okay.
And I think they're comfortable with where this kind of landed at the end of the day.
And that's good to define that. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Sure.
I guess where I'm coming from, I wasn't here for this particular argument, so I'm trying to figure out why this is even here.
The whole chapter?
No, that
Just
paragraph.
the new paragraph?
It was in response to a concern that was raised by a commissioner that this chapter tends to have a very narrow focus of one aspect of sustainability. No concern with that particular, how we're approaching that particular aspect, but that is too narrow a way of looking at sustainability.
But if this is not going to be used in a generic way to help in other developments, as I thought I just heard, and I mean, it's on a case-by-case basis where you guys ask the developers to extend themselves and hopefully give us more with regards to sustainability. Again, maybe it's just me.
Well, I think we were trying to respond to one particular commissioner's concern, and I think the commission can say, we don't care, or we don't like that paragraph, or...
Okay. At the same point, I should say that I don't see any harm in it, necessarily. I don't think it's, you know, there are any unjust requirements or anything like that, so, okay.
Does anybody have any disagreement or difficulties with the paragraph they've inserted?
other than the many typos.
Other than the
I
typos?
think if we have
Okay.
an Office of Sustainability and that they've, you know, been conferred with on this, then, you know, they're more experts, I think, and, you know,
They've been integral.
since
to
they do the
development of
intimate relationship with the developer, then I'm fine with that.
I appreciate. I think I understand what Chantal said is that this is a chapter about sustainability, but we're not addressing all the sustainable elements that we could. And if we're not going to do it, why don't we say that? And I want to harken back, and this is good to your point, that when we do a document like this, it affects future documents. And when we were talking about the Central Issaquah plan, we were talking about, well, what does sustainable mean, and getting into this definition of this big fuzzy word. And so that could be what's stymieing us all together, is the use of the word sustainability. which is this big, huge word when what we're trying to define are more specific things. And I don't know that this paragraph helps to achieve what I think it was Chantal was addressing. So it'd be interesting to hear what she says about it. But to the back to my original point of why would we talk in this agreement about what a developer, let's just call him a developer in this case, does somewhere else? And for instance, the paragraph, 2 paragraphs down, I didn't notice it before, but Swedish is committed to sustainability and they did this, that, and the other thing. Well, I know, I appreciate this and I'm a fan. But when I'm analyzing this contract for developing this land, I don't think that that's pertinent. I mean, what does that have to do with what we want to have done on this piece of land? Let's talk about that and let's be specific and show them what they can do. And
I think sometimes I'll just say something. You guys can throw something at me if you don't want me to. I think sometimes the applicants like it when we recognize that they're doing a good job. You know, so maybe we were stroking a little bit. This isn't gooey. You know, it just says that we recognize that Swedish values sustainability in their business plan. And so we figured we'd say that. And you're right. Does that have anything to do with the obligations that are coming after it? No. It's kind of just us saying that, hey, we recognize that this is part of their kind of corporate, you know, mantra at this point is to include sustainability in their plans. So if you want it out, I mean, I think, you know, I don't think it takes away from any of the requirements of the development agreement, but, you know, the development agreement is also an opportunity to say that, hey, these guys they have white hats on and doctor's gloves.
it's we're only addressing certain parts of sustainability. Why don't we just say that up front and just say this is
Why don't we work on the words of this paragraph? I think we all kind of agree that it's okay if we say that this is maybe secular and not holistic, and maybe this just doesn't say it that well. And we don't talk about the legs of the stool. So, okay, so we'll confer, and maybe we'll share some language with Chantal and get some direction. And since we have, I think, some time in between our next meeting, this might float around as an email to get some feedback back before we come to our next meeting. So the next thing I think we have is some clarity points in 3.4. So in 3.4.1, I think one of the questions that came up at the last commission meeting was to be clear that what we're talking about is that they need to do something with the new development and that they can't necessarily count what was done with the hospital. Because the hospital is great, and everybody says the hospital is great, but I think you could take a lot of the things that were done with the hospital and say, well, they're already done, you know, since the project is the whole project, including the hospital. So what we did in kind of the first section was clarify that this was relating to the new construction. And we did some tweaking, you know, in C, it used to say up to 5%, and we changed it to at least 2%. So there was a little bit of kind of nuances. The Energy Star 75 certification got moved down to the next section. Allowed, I'm not sure what allowed means. Sorry. Yeah, clearly we're saving money on letters. So we'll get the typing figured out. But so again, kind of clarifying, we talked about the reduction in water usage and being clear that if they achieved it through innovative measures, then that counts as an innovation, but there might be some other things that they could reduce it and it not count.
Keith, can you scroll up just a little bit, please?
I can.
Right, just a little bit further. Right there.
Okay.
I know I've asked this every meeting, but it still seems a little exclusive.
Which one?
Technology and innovation. So you're talking about the holistic project. Like I said, they've already met many of these technology innovations through their power plant or their green roof.
Not the technology ones. They haven't done any of those. And so it's asking for one of them.
So Lead Silver might have gotten them these, Michael, I don't know.
But
So
that's,
they haven't used rainwater reuse for irrigation? I mean, green
No.
roof, FSC wood, they haven't done that?
No.
Okay.
So I think our hope is that, so the hope is, again, as we talked about before, that in the conversations we've had with Swedish, it was that this list is hopefully something on here is achievable for them, but it pushes them maybe beyond where they think they were going to go today. And I think that by doing so, it will show other builders in the city that they can get there too. Somebody else has done it in a big project and it didn't swallow them up. So, but there's enough items on here that, the hope is that they would be able to pick something here that wouldn't be too painful for them to get to. Because again, this is more about carrots than it is sticks at the end of the day. We added section 3.4, which is transportation management plan and trip commute reduction. So this is all part of sustainability. Hey, this
this
is
is part of use reduction, conservation. We'll spell those out for you, by the way.
what? Oh, okay. Yes.
got there at the end, but he just dropped another letter and said one down.
Well, yeah, and
So
it's
I have a-
add and not and, yeah.
I have like a wireless keyboard at home, and like every now and then it doesn't pick up. I'm sure it is. Darn Microsoft. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. What? 3.
Yeah, yeah.
3.4 is really 3.5. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Apparently we like to reuse numbers.
Going back to 3.4.2, the technology innovation.
Yes.
I know on the leadership innovation says that needs to be on the new construction, but the
Yes.
technology innovation can be on either,
No.
new or old.
Okay. We'll clarify.
Well, we can clarify, I think the thing, it was kind of the point that Michael was asking that, I'm just saying that because Michael's over there laughing. We don't think that they've done any of the things on this list here, so therefore it doesn't apply to the existing building, and they would still have to do it for new construction, but.
But some of these they could add to the existing.
Right, which would be okay.
Okay,
Since they didn't do it.
okay.
With
So
the
as long
initial
as they add it
construction.
somewhere, that's fine. It doesn't need to be specified.
I'm actually good. So if they wanted to add a cistern to the hospital to catch rainwater to use for irrigation, that should be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about this one also before you leave it. Under, let's see, purchasing green power, for instance, it has a limit on time, and this is a performance standard, but under the recycle and the divert of waste, it doesn't say. So to me, that reads recycle 90% of construction. Oh, that's over because it's construction. Landfill, traditional. Is I for just during building? No, 65% of waste in operations from. That doesn't have a term.
It doesn't.
That's all right. Let's do it forever. Okay. And okay. Well, I have it.
Okay, I'm going to move on to 4.1, Nina.
Yes, please.
Oh, except Eric's got a question.
Go, Mr. E.
I just want to add my support to the carrot versus the stick philosophy that you're incorporating here. I think there's a turning point when a developer has too many sticks and then just has a whole change of philosophy of looking for savings because they're seeing too many dollar signs. So by offering these carrots and giving a variety of choices, hopefully that keeps the proper attitude for a developer to be more favorable in a development towards all the goals that the city has. So I just support that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Nina, you ready for 4.1?
Yep.
Okay, so we added a sentence at the end. which I think addresses another point you guys raised last time. So if certain measures have become commonplace, then they shall no longer be considered innovations and shall be mutually agreed to be removed from the innovations list. So because this is, are we at 30 years now? Are we at 27? We're at some weird number of years. This is a long development agreement. You know, over the course of time, some of these things which might be far-reaching today in 2013 might be commonplace in a decade or so. And the point, again, is that these are supposed to be innovations that push kind of the construction industry to that next plateau. And so this is just recognizing that if by the time they build their last building, if some of the stuff is no longer innovations, then they shouldn't be considered innovations. Whoa, and then there was a lot of stuff here. So we added a section on modification of standards. Is all this new?
Yes.
Did we steal this from somewhere?
I think I must have.
Because permitting is in Appendix D.
Okay.
So I assume we stole this from, let's call it Lakeside or Raleigh. So hopefully
Probably
it's reasonable. If any of this doesn't make sense,
I
then
remember conversations of LEED and whether that exists in the future. So that's where I think that came from. I remember Mike making that comment.
yeah. All right, that's the end for K. Okay, last appendix is L, SEPA. You guys still don't have it. It's not done. So basically, the checklist is in. The SEPA responsible official is doing his review. What's going to end up happening is we believe a mitigated determination of non-significance will be issued, which means there's at least a condition, if not multiple conditions, that will be applied to this project to ensure that it doesn't generate a significant adverse environmental impact. So what Appendix K is going to be, L, K is sustainability, L is basically going to list whatever conditions of approval come out of the environmental review so that they are specifically in the development agreement and don't get lost. So I'm not expecting there to be a boatload of conditions. I expect there might be one, maybe two. So hopefully once that SEPA decision is done, we'll send you guys a copy of it so you can see what kind of conditions might be tied to this project. And that should happen, I think October 7th is the date that the SEPA decision is supposed to be issued. It's my recollection. Okay. Break. Oh, I mean,
Ready, break?
questions and then public comment, or do you want public comment first?
Let's do questions first. Are there any questions back to the applicant or the staff? Okay. Then at this time, I'll open it up to 8:45 for public comment. And if you have anything to say, please come forward and sign in before you speak, please. Not all at once, just one at a time.
I'll hold it back.
Okay, no public comment, so that's now. Last item before adjournment is any open discussion.
Yeah, about timeline for this again. So we won't be talking about this next meeting, and then I assume we'll make our recommendations the meeting after that, so that'll be November?
November 5th.
And is that fine for Swedish, that timeline?
We've been consulting with them.
So just so that you guys know all the pieces that are moving. So we thought we were on a really fast timeline and that we were going to kind of blow through you guys in a short period of time. And so we already advertised for the public hearing at the City Council for October 21st.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. So if you drive up to Swedish now, you'll see there's a sign that says Public Hearing, City Council, October 21st. So because we're not done, and that's fine that we're not done, basically we're going to open the public hearing since we already advertised for it, and we're going to take whatever public testimony there is on the 21st, and then we're going to continue the public hearing to a specific date, and that date is November 18th, okay? So the idea is between now and November 18th that you guys would be done and be ready to make a recommendation to the city council. I need to have at least one land and shore meeting after you guys make your recommendation so they can talk about your recommendation. We've been talking about the development agreement with them along the way, and we'll continue to do that. So the idea would be, I believe at your first meeting in November, which is the 5th, I think, Lucy, that you guys would hopefully make your recommendation on this development agreement on the 5th. The SEPA will be done. Hopefully any other issues that you guys might have would be done. You would make your recommendation. Land and Shore meets the following Tuesday, and then the following Monday after that would be the continuation of the hearing where hopefully the recommendation would get acted on by the city council.
So we're going Discovery Heights and then skipping 3 weeks
Right, because
and then continuing.
October, since tonight's the first day, there are 5 Tuesdays in the month, but we aren't meeting on the 5th. So you will get 3 weeks off.
Is that kind of it for this year? I know, don't we usually try and get stuff done before?
Well, we're still trying to figure out if we're going to bring Bellevue College at the end of the year or do it in January.
So that's a big plan. It's
Yeah,
for the
that'll
whole
be
20 acres
Yeah.
of their property.
It'll be the
And-
next permit you do, but we're just not sure exactly what the timing is yet.
Okay. So we haven't been rushed this year, but we have been before. I'd like to
And-
avoid that.
And we try not to do that.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you guys cranky. So, the good news is we got to, I think, that Swedish had a fairly gracious timeline. We got started early. A lot of the issues were not different than what had already been worked through on the Highlands. So it was in our terms, it was development agreement light. It was a light version. And so I think, in terms of what else is queuing up for us, I'd have to defer to Lucy on that.
Yeah, I was just starting to make a list. I think that some of the things, so the Bellevue College would be the next one. 2 other permits I'm aware of. One is Swedish I think, is hoping next year to come in with their master site plan for this property. I don't know when. We haven't started talking. We're just trying to finish this before we start talking about that. But that would happen next year sometime. And the other thing that appears to be heading your way is a plat in Talus for the last sort of property, which is, where the reservoir is. Talus Drive comes up, and you would go around, and you would get to the reservoir, and those are the sort of last 2 remaining empty parcels that you haven't done a land use permit on. Those are parcels 7 and 9.
Can I ask, is that past the water towers?
Well, one is right in front where Talus Drive
Yeah.
tees.
So in between
That's
the,
not parcel 9. So where Talus Drive tees,
right,
that's parcel 9.
right.
And then you go around 9
Uh-huh.
up to the reservoir, and you continue on up the hill, and that's
Oh.
parcel 7. And so one of them might be an STP and the other a plat, or they might both be a plat. We're still talking. They're 2 different builders.
What, STP, sorry?
A site development permit. So that's kind of like what we did with Lakeside with Polygon, or blocks 21 and 22 with Polygon. Those were site development permits, and I know I still owe
there
you
was
that.
talk
charge.
about preserving that, but I guess that's not the case now.
Well, those are developable properties. And they've been cleared, and so, I mean, there
I thought there was
is,
going to be like a proposed TDR type of situation, but no.
The housing market came back.
Yeah, I got you.
and they've got views,
Okay.
so. Well, but we haven't gotten a permit, so we don't know what's going to happen, but that's where it stands right now. Let's see, I'm trying to think. We don't expect anything
Okay.
else on Lakeside. We don't expect anything else on Raleigh. I think, other than the Microsoft property, nothing else is undeveloped in Issaquah Highlands, unless, well, those would be administrative.
Can I ask, for Taos, remember the one that was at the bottom of the cliff? Whatever came of that?
Haven't heard from them in over a year,
Oh, okay.
or about a year. the office complex.
No, I think it was some towns, or some homes, below existing Talus right now.
Oh, you're thinking Amundsen. They finished their plat, and we thought we might, something might happen because the housing market came back.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard anything.
Was it Raleigh that we talked about using the Talus TDRs?
No, Lakeside, in future phases will need to purchase TDRs.
But if those are, were we discussing the TDRs from the properties that we'll be looking at?
The TDRs for Lakeside might come from Talus, they might come from elsewhere
So,
in the
I
city.
don't think
Talus-
there's anything specific, right? I think.
Talus is not a sending site. So they can't come from Talus unless the council changes Talus to a sending site.
It's right, it's a receiving site.
It's a
right
nothing. The master developer asked to remove it as a receiving site.
You're right. I forgot.
So Lakeside, so the city has a TDR sending and receiving site map. So if Lakeside was going to go ahead and purchase their TDRs, they would have to choose from one of the sending sites in the city or one of the, or a property in King County,
Talus or Lakeside?
Lakeside. So, because Lakeside has TDRs that they would buy.
Right.
So they could either buy them from one of the sending sites in the city. The city has an interlocal agreement with King County to take 75 total development rights from the county. Or the new changes to the TDR code would allow the city to issue TDR certificates directly to the developer, so they could buy them from the city.
I seem to recall that the Issaquah Environmental Council was supportive of Lakeside because they thought the TDRs would come from Talus. Is that
No, I think,
Not-
They were
I mean-
supportive of TDRs in general. I'm not sure that it was specific to Talus.
okay?
I think there were two pieces there. I think they were supportive of the TDRs with Lakeside, and they were supportive of the Lakeside, of the Talus master developer transferring his remaining units off of Talus. So I think there were two pieces
Sure.
that weren't necessarily connected.
Okay.
Can I just offer
Thanks.
feedback real quick to Centerra, where they had the commercial property that they never developed, and they wanted to go to add another townhome unit, and I guess that was declined, and now it's a nice green space for kids to play or whatever, or walking the dog. Just feedback.
It's a temporary holding spot.
Oh.
So the city owns, so it was conveyed to the city. And the idea is it might stay a green space, but if somebody came and wanted to build a little retail shop, that's what it was intended for. So I think we would be open to having that conversation with somebody if they wanted to develop it as
So
a
strictly just retail and.
retail, not housing.
Okay.
But across the street, what we call Talus Parcel 16-1,
Yes.
they are about to submit an ASDP, an Administrative Site Development Permit for that property, which will include retail.
Oh, it'll include retail and residential.
And residential, and they are planning to build next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a sort of a minutia process question. When you guys work from a development agreement, you called this a DA light, and we've removed a bunch of things. Do you keep track of the things that get removed? Because we tend to do our development agreements based on the last one. So I'd hate for these things that fall out not to be included in future ones.
I think that's a great point, and I think our intent is to not do that either. I think we found that when we stripped out like all the residential, or we tried to, some things fell out that needed to go back in. So, and that's part of why we go through this process, is because you guys are great at catching some of the things we miss, and that may not be a lot of fun, Nina, but you guys do a good job at it. But the more eyes on it, the better.
And I do, all the electronic, and I do dump all the paper, but I keep all the electronic versions. So, we do have that to go back and look at what we did. And I've done, compare documents electronically to see what changes sometimes on certain appendices. So, the intent is to try and use the stuff we have to figure out what we did.
was off. Anything else? Open discussion? Anything from you guys?
Keith just invited me by saying it that way. No, I have enjoyed this process, and I think we are working together really well this time. We're falling into sync here. I feel a lot of response from the staff, from the comments that we've made, and it's really been good. And even when we're here, not just take it home, but responding to and making adjustments while we're here in chambers is really great. And that might be why we're moving along at a reasonable speed, and appreciate it.
I could also say when I look at other cities and how they deal with things, we're really blessed to have this process and everyone involved, and the close relationship that we do have with the city and the developers that we've been working with. It's been pretty fantastic, and we're lucky, I think, compared to other cities.
It's a partnership we value.
Okay, Keith, I'm sorry, we missed it by just a minute. You're under an hour meeting tonight. With that, I'll close it at 8:59. Have a good evening, everyone.